The West has always been, and will always be, a place where there's a struggle to survive and where nature strikes heavy blows at you. But I think that's part of the West. That's geography. And I think part of that conquering of the West seeped into the American character. In many ways, the West has been a geography of hope for the country as a whole.
For 40 years, as Americans moved west, the western plains of Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas were passed over. With better land available elsewhere, they were considered too dry for homesteading. But now, the hunger for land reached even into these inhospitable places. The railroads and the states outdid themselves to lure new settlers.
It was one of the greatest con jobs in history. They had a promotional campaign in Nebraska that I think was spending $1 million a year. Back when you could buy a fancy 5-course dinner for $1.25. I mean, it was advertising. They had their own magazines, brochures. They had journalists on the take. I mean, it was a phenomenon. And in order to sell it, they described these beautiful regions where you could raise a bountiful harvest of practically anything, and summer lingered into November, and by February it was already spring. And we're talking about Nebraska and places like that.
As it happened, the 1870s and early 1880s were unusually wet years in the West. The prairies, plowed and planted for the first time, yielded bumper crops. Promoters made the most of it. The plains might once have been desert-like, they said, but no longer. The climate itself, they promised, had changed for good. And it was the very presence of settlers that had changed it.
The plow will go forward. Godspeed the plow. By this wonderful provision, which is only man's mastery over nature, the clouds are dispensing copious rains. The plow is more powerful in peace than the sword in war, the instrument which separates civilization from savagery and converts a desert into a farm or garden. To be more concise, rain follows the plow. Charles Dana Wilbur.
Within 10 years, nearly 2 million people migrated farther onto the plains. The populations of Colorado and Nebraska doubled. South Dakota's, Montana's, and Wyoming's tripled. But as it turned out, rain did not follow the plow. The wet years came to an end. Many places on the high plains emptied just as quickly as they had filled with homesteaders. But some stubbornly hung on.
There's no question in my mind that the settlers are the real heroes. Yes, yes, indeed. In this harsh country, much of it harsh and forbidding and demanding, tough country, the fact that people could go there and establish communities and make a living for themselves and build up societies, I think that was a real triumph.
In a year's time, a homesteader would encounter a catalog of meteorological disasters. In the springtime, there'd be the floods and the tornadoes that would make it difficult to get into the fields to plant a crop. Once the crop was planted, you might go for 6-8 weeks at a time with no rain at all, and then it was bad enough that the rain was half of what the homesteader might have expected in his homeland. Here, it would fall all in one day and flood out that which had managed to survive through the drought. There were the grasshopper storms and the windstorms, hailstorms that would pound a crop into the ground, in some cases freezing a crop in July when you thought there was no chance of anything happening like that at all. In the fall, at harvest time, fire could take it as the fire swept across the grasslands. Through the winter, it'd be a matter of surviving the cold. And then in the spring, you started the whole mess all over again. We look at these people sitting in front of their sod houses and we think, what squalor, living in a dirt house. We see women in maybe an elegant dress, but without shoes on. And we think, these people were poor. But what I see is pride. What they're really saying is, look how rich we are. We're stinking rich. Our muskmelons are this big. We have 2 horses. We have a cow, and there she is, pegged right back there. They're showing us that they made it. These are not people who are embarrassed by their situation. They are drenched in pride.
Ah, Nebraska land, sweet Nebraska land, upon thy burning soil I stand, and I look away across the plains, and I wonder why it never rains.
What's remarkable to me is that they were singing, and that they were laughing while they were singing. But we've reached the land of desert sweet, where nothing grows for man to eat. The wind it blows with feverish heat across these plains so hard to beat. But that's not a sad song. It sounds like the blues when I say it. But it was a song of laughter and rejoicing, because they were laughing at themselves in this crazy situation they were in. We do not live, we only stay because we're too poor to move away.
We have no wheat, we have no oats, we have no corn to feed our shoats. Our chickens are so very poor, they beg for crumbs outside our door. In Nebraska land, sweet Nebraska land, upon thy burning soil I stand, and I look away across the plains, and I wonder why it never rains.